I see on social media, there's a lot of complaining about earlier generations. Either they ruined things for us, or they somehow had it better. And that's not fair or true. Now, I'm not the youngest generation anymore, there's a couple behind me. But the truth is, it's all the same. It's always the same. It's always hard choices to make. You're always up against a budget. You never have everything you want. And you have to make sacrifices. Let me get it out of the way by saying that previous generations had wars to deal with. I didn't have to go to war, but there was a draft on my parents' generation, and the generation before that, and before that. So people died. We've had a long stretch of peace, which I think a lot of people take for granted. But just looking at economics, which is what most people are talking about, things weren't better or easier. If you look at some prices, you can say a house in the 60s, you adjust for inflation, was maybe about $200,000. Now, that's not exactly cheap, but it's half of what houses are now. And granted, housing is more expensive now. Apartments are more expensive now. Some things are more expensive, some things get cheaper. But I will point out with real estate that that 3-bedroom house for $200,000 is not a 3-bedroom house now. Look at the square footage. Those were tiny little cramped houses. You had 3 small rooms, a single bathroom, and a main room, which was probably your dining, living, and kitchen all combined. The houses now are mini mansions or palaces compared to what they were back then. So it does make a little sense that they cost more. But we can look at other things. A television in the 60s, the lowest end model, was equivalent to about $2,000 now. It was a struggle to buy that television. And other things, other conveniences like a washing machine or a dryer, was up there too, a couple $1,000 equivalent. And even a small thing like a toaster, countertop toaster, was the equivalent of about $250 now. And yeah, they lasted longer, but they were a lot more expensive. So I can find toasters under $20 and sometimes even, you know, $10 or $12. Yeah, it breaks after a year, but gosh, it's relatively inexpensive. And food, they had different eating habits. Food was generally more expensive comparatively, and they just had different eating habits. Like potato chips and snack food uh, existed back then, but most people bought them for a special occasion, for a party. They didn't throw it in their weekly shopping cart. So although a bag of potato chips is $8 now, which is crazy, think of it like caviar or other hors d'oeuvres. You're just buying it for your guests. There's a lot of complaints about jobs, and nobody likes a job. if you liked if you liked it so much, you'd pay them to go there. But jobs are relatively easy to come by now. And I don't mean if there's a recession or something, but I just mean any job. A good job is hard to come by, but a bad job, a minimum wage job, are relatively plentiful. And there's been easy to get jobs after the World War II or so, when the factory and industrial capacity increased. Back then, you might get an assembly line job, which is Pretty terrible job, or a warehouse job. But before that, before the Great Wars, jobs were very difficult to come by. There wasn't that industrial base there. You were working at a family business or on a farm somewhere. I think I'm going to have to pause while my goats misbehave for a bit. People become better at making these hard choices for what to buy, what not to buy, where to spend your money as they get older, which is why the youth tend to make these complaints. As you get older, you tend to care less about what other people think or what other people say you should or shouldn't do. You make your own choices. And since they're your own choices, you learn to live with them and you stop complaining. In this modern day world, there isn't really enough money to go around because the main thing is we confuse a lot of luxury items for necessities. And it really becomes apparent when you live out here off grid, or for example, living out of your car for a bit or panhandling. Some of the true necessities like food and clothing have really come down in price. I mean, the cost of a t-shirt now versus, just not a name brand, just a t-shirt to cover yourself is, you can get a pack of 6 for $12, $2 a t-shirt. And while a lot of food has increased in price, red meat and a lot of these prepackaged food and even pre-made bread, but things like rice and beans and flours and other grains have really come down in price. Very affordable compared to generations past. Also, I think we're a little slow to adapt. Several generations ago, when people moved from the country, from farms into the city, they did it to save money and to get closer to where their work is. And it was a huge adjustment for them. And it's possible that now that it's reversing, it's the other way, especially with remote working. City life is extremely expensive, an apartment in the city. And it doesn't really work out economically unless you get rid of your car and, live close to work, walk to work. But oftentimes, a factory isn't in a very nice neighborhood, so it's difficult to do. And we spend a lot of money on what is essentially entertainment. You need an internet connection to survive, to earn money. But how much of an internet connection, and are you really using it to earn money? Or is that mostly entertainment? Your Netflix subscription is not about earning money, your livelihood. And I'm definitely not trying to make choices for you, whatever makes you happy. But I think we'd all benefit, and I know I've benefited from reevaluating your whole life from the ground up. I just don't think it's necessarily fair to blame or envy these older generations. The grass is always greener. It wasn't all wine and roses back then either. So just something to think about, something to work on, and possibly make your life a little bit easier and a little bit better. That's all I have for today. Thanks for watching. Oh, come on, goat. You sneeze. And I'll see you in the next video.